Hi everyone, thanks for that great introduction. As mentioned, my name is Madeline McGee, and I'm speaking today as the co-chair of the Great Lakes Working Group for the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts. I'm going to give a quick overview of the new assessment report that came out earlier this year. For those that don't know, WICCI is a collaborative effort led by the Nelson Institute at UW-Madison and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And this organization was started in the mid-2000s. WICCI's goal is to act as a link between climate science and climate adaptation. Our mission is to generate and share information that can be used by everyone in Wisconsin to develop solutions to climate change throughout the state. WICCI came out with a really innovative report in 2011 on climate impacts and adaptations in Wisconsin. However, this report is over 10 years old, and we have lots of great new science in the state. Through 2020 and 2021, WICCI updated the earlier report to cover new information on climate impacts and adaptation. The new report is in electronic format to enable rapid dissemination and easier updating. This electronic format allowed WICCI to structure it to start with higher level points in messaging, then use clickable links for readers to dig deeper on topics that they may be interested in, such as detailed working group reports and other more focused materials. This allows us to target stakeholders at the level that best suits them. Government officials who may be more interested in the big picture messages and solutions can get that information easily, while conservation professionals who need more detail and technical information for their day-to-day work can dig into those details and gather the relevant information. This report also incorporated emphasis on climate justice compared to the first report, and WICCI hired a professional science writer to interview stakeholders and develop narratives to improve science communication and put impacts into a Wisconsin-specific perspective. The report took a little over a year to put together, and we had over 200 scientists and practitioners contribute to writing the report, representing over 60 universities, tribes, state and federal agencies, and other organizations. The assessment report is structured around 5 thematic areas: air, land, water, the built environment, and people, with different working groups contributing to the different themes. Today, I'm going to give a very quick and dirty overview of the high points for each of these thematic areas, starting with the air or climate area. The biggest take home is that Wisconsin is getting warmer and wetter. Looking at the graph on the left, we see that there has been a uniform warming trend statewide since 1950, and much of the area surrounding the Bay of Green Bay has seen about a 3-degree Fahrenheit increase in annual average air temperature from 1950 to 2020. On the precipitation side of things, there's a little more variability, but the whole state has gotten wetter between 1950 and 2020, with the Green Bay area seeing between a 10 and 20% increase in precipitation over that 70-year period. And we will continue to get warmer. Modeling results show consensus around a 4 to 6 degree temperature increase statewide by mid-century when compared to the contemporary period. Greater increases are projected in winter and fall. Luckily for you folks around Green Bay, Lake Michigan acts to mitigate some of the warming temperatures along the lake shore, so you'll see not quite as warm as everybody else throughout the state. While model results agree on temperature increases, that is not the case for precipitation. Ensemble climate models are in consensus that winter and spring precipitation will increase substantially statewide. However, the same can't be said for summer. Each climate model has slightly different conditions and ways of parameterizing variables like cloud cover and evapotranspiration. That's why we use ensemble climate models to try to project things into the future. If the models are in agreement, we know that that scenario is pretty likely to happen. If they're not in agreement, we know we have some unanswered questions. For the summer, about half of our climate models anticipate large increases in summer precipitation and half anticipate decreases in precipitation during the summer. So at this point, it's really hard to know exactly where we may be for summer precipitation. Although looking at annual precipitation, all models are in agreement that annual precipitation will increase in the future. What we can say with some certainty is that extremes will be more common in the future. As you can see from these plots, we expect the number of days over 90 degrees to increase by up to 30 days per year, depending on where you are in the state. And again, while we do see large increases along Lake Michigan and the Bay of Green Bay, you can see that there is some mitigating effect from Lake Michigan. This may help offset some extreme consequences for lakeshore communities. And the same is true for extreme precipitation as well. These graphs show the days per decade with 2-inch daily rainfalls, and we expect increases of 10 additional days, depending on which part of the state you're looking at, when comparing the end of the last century to the mid-century. Moving to the other thematic areas, we know that climate change will impact all land types. Ag production will be less competitive, and climate change especially is overwhelming conservation efforts on soil health and water quality protection. All ecosystem types are becoming more stressed, habitats are becoming less diverse, and there is increased risk of pests and disease that are putting climate-vulnerable species at high risk. For water resources, the big take-home message is that warming temperatures and changing precipitation patterns are decreasing water quality and causing changes to aquatic ecosystems. More harmful algal blooms and changes in aquatic species distribution may be particularly problematic for some communities, as can loss of ice cover or weaker ice cover contributing to ecosystem impacts as well as things like winter drownings. Looking at the built environment, climate change means we need to rethink our approach to infrastructure. Current infrastructure wasn't built for future precipitation events, and coastal infrastructure is particularly at risk from changes in Great Lakes water levels, and statewide, flooding has had the biggest impact on our infrastructure overall. These extreme storms and flooding present the greatest risk and impacts to communities so far. However, warming temperatures also directly harm health, and we expect that extreme warm temperatures may have significant impacts on community health in the future. It's also important to remind ourselves that climate change disproportionately impacts certain communities, and statewide, folks who contribute the least to carbon emissions tend to have the greatest climate change vulnerability and impacts. This is one reason why planning and engagement with high-risk groups is crucial. So now that I've told you all the bad news, you're probably wondering what we can do. The short, although not super easy answer is that we need to decrease carbon emissions and invest in solutions to reduce emissions and reduce climate impacts. Luckily, the WICCI report and associated materials can help to do this. I'll provide a few examples from different working groups. So multiple working groups touched on mitigation actions, and one example is from the Agricultural Working Group. This group synthesized data on greenhouse gas emission sources in the ag industry. Ag emissions represent the second largest emission source, though still much smaller than the energy industry, as you can see in the pie chart on the right. The working group identified the largest sources of emissions from available data statewide. And you can see from the bar chart that agricultural soil management is the largest source of carbon emissions in the ag sector. From this assessment, the working group was then able to provide specific actions that could be taken in Wisconsin to reduce or offset these emissions. For example, increasing continuous living cover on agricultural lands can increase soil carbon storage and reduce the need for fertilizer application and associated emissions. And I encourage you to read the Ag Working Group's information to learn more. The Forestry Working Group, Infrastructure Working Group, and others had similar processes of identifying emission sources and developing mitigation approaches to reduce emissions in different sectors. Now, switching to the other side of things, how to offset climate impacts or adaptation, the larger assessment report lists various solutions for climate adaptation by sector. Then, many of the working groups provide additional detail in their reports and technical resources on how to offset climate impacts. These resources and ideas can be used by anyone, depending on what your role and sector are. For example, the Infrastructure Working Group has lists on their website based on sector. This A teeny tiny example here that's probably hard for you to read on the slide includes recommendations for folks managing sanitary sewer systems and wastewater treatment facilities. So managers of these systems can click on the type of system they're managing and then get a list of possible climate adaptation actions that they can implement in their job. This list, developed by the Water Resources Working Group, has adaptation strategies for water quality. And the full list, as well as recommendations for things like aquatic invasive species, water levels, and ice cover, can be found in the working group's report online. Many of the working groups, including my own Great Lakes Working Group, developed a suite of adaptation actions or approaches that can be used in tandem depending on management goals. These range from actions that try to maintain current conditions, for example, actions you might take to promote high-quality habitat, to protect high-quality habitats or threatened and endangered species, to those actions that may promote or direct change a certain direction to offset climate impacts. Looking through the components of the WICCI report and each working group's detailed materials can help you figure out how best to offset climate impacts for your sector. Additionally, working groups have compiled their own or outside resources, helping folks walk through adaptation strategies. One resource many of the working groups have played a role in is the development of adaptation menus, led by the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, or NIACS. The Forestry Working Group, Great Lakes Working Group, and Plant and Natural Communities Working Group have all worked with NIACS to develop adaptation menus that can be used by practitioners to create site-specific climate adaptation solutions. I'd like to wrap up by reminding everyone that many, maybe even all, conservation efforts are climate adaptation efforts too. Adding climate adaptation to what we're already doing can seem really daunting because of resource and staffing needs. But many efforts that we're already working on will have climate adaptation benefits as well. For example, in agriculture, many soil health practices can have greenhouse gas mitigation benefits. Habitat restorations can build climate resiliency into our ecosystems, and water quality improvements can offset negative climate impacts. Most projects can incorporate a climate lens by simply thinking about what impacts are coming and slightly altering our plans to adapt. For example, we could increase rainfall amounts in design standards, change planting species on specific restoration projects, or target more resilient project sites. So I'd like to leave you with that thought and challenge you to think about what you're already doing that has climate adaptation benefits, or how you can easily incorporate climate benefits into your current projects. With that, I would like to say thank you for listening to me today, and if anyone has any questions or would like more information, I encourage you to go to the WICCI website. Just Google WICCI, and it's the first link that will pop up, and go there for more information to learn about climate adaptation and climate impacts. Thank you.